Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and I'm making another video. I've done videos on fetch and promises before, but I thought I'd make another video because I just kind of like, I don't know, thought of a easy, fun way for you to practice using fetch by making your own JSON files. So in your VS Code, just make a new folder. So I'm going to make a new folder, and we'll just call this fetch practice. And all you really need to do in here is create two files. We're going to create an index.html, and then we're going to create a data.json. Okay? And in your data.json, we're going to write some JSON data, which looks a lot like a JavaScript object. So we can start off with curly brackets. The big difference between like JSON, which is really technically a way of writing your strings. You're writing a string that looks like a JavaScript object that then gets parsed into a JavaScript object, a Python dictionary, a Ruby hash, a struct, whatever. Okay? But basically the keys, so in this case, if I want to put like an object of myself, name, see the key is also in quotations, and the value of that key is also a string. Okay, but otherwise it's just like a JavaScript object. So age, and then my age right now is 35. So right here we have a JSON object. Now since this is a JSON file, not a JavaScript file, I don't have to export it or anything. Okay, it's just a JSON file, and this is the data in that JSON file. Okay, you can have an array of stuff, an object of stuff. It's just essentially think of it as like a giant JavaScript construct. Okay, that's why it's called JavaScript Object Notation, JSON. So generally, when we make calls to other APIs all across the internet from our own backend servers, all those servers are generally trained to send back JSON data. Okay, so we need to do two things. We need to make a request to that place somewhere out in the internet, some server somewhere, and say, hey, can you give us this data? Then they're going to give us this data, and then we have to take that data and turn it into like a JavaScript thing, okay, that we can use. So now in your HTML file, if you're in VS Code, you can just do an exclamation point and see this is an Emmet abbreviation. Emmet's like a nice little tool for shorthand doing HTML stuff. But you just do that, and that's going to give you all your boilerplate for HTML. And we're just going to put in a script tag here. What a script tag is going to allow us to do is going to allow us to do JavaScript without having to make a whole separate JavaScript file. This way, it's just a little bit simpler to follow along. Okay, so we can just write JavaScript within these script tags. Now there are several popular functions in order to make these requests to get that JSON data. One is like the Ajax function that's part of the jQuery library. One is Axios, which is its own library that's used very popular in the back end and front end. But if you're working in the browser in your front end code, the browser already has a function that's built into it. You don't need to bring in jQuery. You don't need to bring in the Axios library. It has a function called fetch that's built right in the JavaScript. Just note, fetch doesn't exist in the backend. So if you're working in Node, you'd have to download a third-party library called Node Fetch to use fetch in the backend. Okay, but basically the way fetch works is that you say fetch, and then in fetch you pass in a string of where you're making a request to. Okay, we're going to be making a request to ourselves because we have the data in a file in the same folder. So I can just say, hey, I'm requesting /data.json. Which that just means whenever you do a URL like this, where it's just slash and you don't have like a whatever.com, you're just saying, hey, I want something for myself. Okay, it's from the same server which is serving this current website. That's where we're making the request from. It's what's called a relative URL. Okay, it's relative to where you are now. Okay, if it was going to be a separate website, so a separate domain, then I'd actually have to specify the whole domain, and we'll do that. We'll show an example of that. Okay, now what fetch does, it's going to go make a request for that data, but it's asynchronous, which means it might take a few milliseconds for it to happen. So what JavaScript does, it uses something called a promise. Okay, so when fetch does its thing, I don't get back the data right away. Instead, I get back this object called a promise, and that promise is waiting for that data to arrive. So basically, if I try, so like if I did this, like if I go, hey, I want my data to equal the result of fetch, watch what happens. If I console log data, by console.log data. Okay, if you hear my cocktail in the background, well, that's a thing. Okay, I'm going to open this up with live server. It's going to create a server that's serving our page. Again, the page has nothing in it. So we're going to go to our JavaScript console. So I did Control-Shift-I. You can also just right-click, go to Inspect to get this inspector window. I'm going to go to console and see, here's the console log. So I can see here that this is the console log that I wrote on line 11. And see, all I have is this promise object. Okay. This promise object is that object that's waiting. And see, the promise did finish. So you see, like, it did get fulfilled. And here I can actually find the data in here. But it says this readable stream thing. And I can't really use that. Like, it's in this sort of weird structure that I can't use. So how do I use the data? Okay, since I'm getting this promise object. Well, the promise object has a function built into it called then. And what then basically says is that once the promise is fulfilled, so essentially once the promise's state turns into fulfilled, it's been satisfied, okay, then it's going to run a function that passes in this data, this body, okay? So you have to pass a function to .then that says, hey, I want you to do this with the data. So I'm going to just make use of that. Okay. Okay, so let's try that out. So what you do is that this function, let me get rid of these few characters. So this fetch returns the promise. Okay, what we can do then is just chain off of it. So .then, and to make it look even cleaner, we'll just knock it onto the next line. And then we're going to pass a function. So there's our function that we're passing into this .then. So when this fetch is complete, this .then is going to run this function. And into that function, it's going to pass the data. So we need to actually create a parameter to capture that data. So we're going to say response. Okay, and then in here, we'll say what we want to happen. Okay, and what we want it to do is we want this function to return response.json. Okay. Okay, because remember, what did we see? We saw that that we got this readable string object. Okay, and that readable stream object, that's not actual text. So what response.json does is it takes that readable stream, which was the result, the body of our promise, and actually turns it into a JavaScript object. This parses that readable stream into a JavaScript object. But it returns another promise. So that means I get this new promise object once again. So guess what? I need to do another .then. So that way when that parsing of that string finishes, so like when it's done parsing the readable stream, I can actually get the actual data. So we'll do another .then. So once again, I have to write another function. But here we're going to say, hey, we're going to call it data this time because this should be our final data. And just to make sure that I got the data, what I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log the data. Okay, so let's take a look. And let's refresh the page. Uncount promise. Okay, so see, now I'm getting some errors here. So whenever I'm getting an error, the best thing, okay, so it's not finding the file data.json. So let's see, is it in the same folder? Fetch, it's called data.json, so why is it not finding it? Data.json. Let's create another browser. Let's try it out. Oh, okay, so I see. So see, here's the reason why. So you see, it's actually the URL. Because basically the way live server works is actually serving the scratch folder. So technically the URL isn't /data.json. It's going to be /fetch practice /index.data.json. So I need to just change the URL. So it's actually going to be /fetch practice /data.json. And there we go. So I'm getting the data. Okay, so first it went through that. First the fetch happened. Then once the data arrived, this .then got triggered. But again, we only got this readable stream thing. So we take that readable string and turn it into a JavaScript object by saying response.json, which gives us back another promise. So then off of that, we chain off of that promise, and then this function actually gets the actual data we can work with. Anything you want to do with that data, you got to do in here. It won't work afterwards. Okay, so if I do this, console log.data after this function, it won't work. Okay, because these .thens are trained to wait for the data. The code that's written afterwards isn't going to wait for the data. It's synchronous, not asynchronous. So if I'll see here, you'll see this like console log. See that console log tried to happen first. So even though it's on line 36, and this is on line 13, this line 36 ran first. Okay, because this code, the code in the .thens, waited for the data to come back. So anything you want to do with that data, you got to do it inside the .thens. Okay, always keep that in mind. So if you want to work with the data from an API call, you got to do it inside the .then. Okay, cool. So that's like doing it relative, but I actually have some dummy data you can play with. So if we go to dummy-data.netlify.app, here I just have some just general data. So if we do this and I go grab Mario Brothers, I'll grab the URL. So I'll just copy the link address. And I'm just going to swap that out. This is going to become, okay, and it goes through the same exact process. It's going to make a call from here. It's going to get the data, take that data, turn it into JSON, and then this second .then gets the data, and I'll see, let's see, reference error, data is not defined, that's fine. Oh, okay, yeah, we have a CORS issue. That's good to know. Got it. So let's talk about what this is. So CORS, because you'll get this. Sometimes you make a call to an API and you get this CORS error. What CORS means is cross-origin resource sharing. So notice that the browser notices that I'm making, my website is 127.0.1550. Okay, and I'm making a call to this URL. So these are two different URLs. And when the browser sees that, it's thinking, well, does this website have permission to get data from this website? So what it's going to do, it's going to ask my website, which is hosted on Netlify, and ask it, hey, do you have permission to grab this data? And if it doesn't have permission, okay, or if it doesn't, it's going to look for permission. If it doesn't get it, it then says, hey, nope, you got blocked. Okay, and that's what this is saying. This is saying, hey, the website you're making a request from never said that it's okay to make this request, so we're not going to allow you to do it. Okay, so that would require a change on this website. So basically, there's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do as a person making the request. There's ways, there's like proxy servers, and there's ways to kind of get around it. But ideally, what would happen is that the website where I'm requesting the data would give me the permission to do that. Cool. So, but I mean, that data is there. So if I click here, see that data is there. I just can't make a request from another website currently. I have to look into see whether there's a way for me in Netlify to actually play with CORS permissions. But aside from that, yeah, that's how you do fetch. So I mean, another site we can try is Json Placeholder, which also has like dummy data we can play with. So if I were to grab this URL here from their example of fetch, what's going to happen if I put that here? So again, I didn't have to change any of the code. It's just making a call to another URL. Okay, and there you go. See, like I can get the data. So this is what's referred to as a GET request. Okay, by default, fetch makes a GET request, which means we're getting data. But sometimes you need to send data. So if you need to send data, you need to like do something else. What you have to do is you have to pass in a second object, a second argument to fetch. And here you can like specify certain things like the method. So if you're doing something other than a GET request, like a post or a put or delete, any kind of headers you would specify here. So oftentimes you might have like something like a content type header that you have to put in. And again, if you need to do this, you probably know you need to do this. Application JSON, that's a very typical thing you'll have to do. And then also sometimes you send the data you're actually sending. That would be the body. Okay, and we have to send that body as JSON. They give us JSON. We get to give them JSON. So how do I turn something into a JSON? I use this function called Json.Stringify. And then you can pass it an object. So I can just pass it an object. This is like name, hello. Okay, and that will turn this object into a JSON string that we can then send in this request. Okay, I need a comma here. Okay, so that's like the ins and outs of fetch and making your basic API calls. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out all my other videos. Leave comments. Follow me on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me all the places. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And also check out devnursery.com. Okay, so make sure you check out devnursery.com where you can find all sorts of other playlists for all my videos and whatnot. Have a great day and enjoy.